today to see what questions you might have about DesignShop or pretty much whatever you want to talk about. And we'll try to get them answered for you or get them on to the next one or see if it needs a special session or what. So give me a second to make sure I can see questions over here. Maybe. How do I do that? I guess refresh this page. Ah, there it is. All right, I gotta mute it. Click on the video. Come on. Yes, I can make sure I can see questions. There. All right, so I can see the Facebook feed here. I think I can see the YouTube feed as well, although I'll be checking that one. I'll have to bounce back and forth with it. All right, so I'm going to start off by answering any questions. Remember, type them into the comments, see what we can get answered for you. And I'll start off with the questions I had from this week. All right. Is there any way to explain or could I explain what setting for Acti-feed and why you choose that setting for embroidering on rope bowls? So there are a bunch of different resources you can look at for Acti-feed. On August 20th, I believe, on that DesignShop Talk, we talked about Acti-feed and how it works. If you go to the manual for DesignShop, you can also find a video that will take you and explain all about Acti-feed. So I'll try to get those links for you in the comments here. But the rope bowls, if you haven't seen them, I just quick linked to this so that this is what, if you're not familiar with them, this is what they're asking about, is how do you do things like this, okay? So the key to that is going to be making sure that you have an appropriate design for it. Number one, you need something that's not heavy fill, that's got open stitching for the most part. So if you look through pictures of ones that have been done, most of them are all just light stitching. Now, as far as setting up your machine, things you want to think about is the material's thicker, right? And because it's thicker, what you're going to want to do is make sure you increase your Acti-feed and you pick up your presser foot, because there's no reason to hammer the daylights out of the material with your foot when you can pick it up, right? So what I would recommend doing is just like what the little tutorial there has. Use some Vilene or a cut and wash type stabilizer, hoop it. You would put your rope bowl down and tack it down. If you want, you can run a running stitch, although it's going to be a lot easier to pick it out if you just do a whip stitch around the edge by hand and just secure it down to the stabilizer. And then from there, up your Acti-feed. Personally, I would probably start around 6 to maybe as my minimum preset on the Acti-feed. The thicker it is, the higher number you're going to need. So I would start at a minimum of 6 and then go up from there. Make sure you're using a sharp needle. And the design is not solid fill and heavy density, that it's more open. All right. Good morning in Alaska, Lorena. All right. Can you step and repeat along a curve, such as a vector line or a circle? No. You can get creative with your decorative stitching, with your walks, but there is no step and repeat along a curve. Okay. How do you close a vector line shape? So vector lines, if you haven't drawn them, it's this one right here, right? So to get to that fly out, if you've never seen it, you left click and hold down your mouse on that button and you'll see there's a vector line input. So when you're drawing your vector line, left clicks are straight points, right clicks are curves. So if I want to close this at any point, so here I want it to close, I would hold my shift key down and hit enter, and that will close the shape for you, okay, for your vector line. That works with using vector lines. It works with your walk input method. So again, if I'm drawing with my walk, if I do hold the shift key down on your keyboard and then hit enter, it'll close the shape for you, okay? It also works with your single lines. Again, if I draw a shape and I hold shift enter, it will close the shape. And so you can see that's a vector, that's my walk. There's a single line center, which is a constant width satin stitch. All of those close the shape automatically by holding shift and enter. Okay, so to end it, shift, enter on the keyboard. All right, what else do we have? Anything on YouTube now that I know how to get to those comments? No, all right. So let's see what else. What's the best way to sew a 3x2 rectangle on a 5 panel hat without getting distortion? Anytime you're sewing on something curved or a hat like that, you're going to end up with distortions where it looks more like a trapezoid. So the best thing you can do is it's a little bit of a trial and error based on the hat you're doing it, but you would want to distort the design in the opposite direction of how it's going to distort. So basically make the trapezoid, when you sew a rectangle, if it sews in, well, that means what you're going to need to do is sew it so it's going the opposite direction. So when it actually sews out, it'll do a rectangle. That is going to be very dependent on the hat you're doing and, what the design is. But because of the nature of the curve and whatnot, it's not a thing. You've got to somehow adjust your design to account for that. Okay. How do you do... Excuse me. Sorry. I've picked up a cold. All right, how do you do 2 borders outline around a true type font? There was a question also typed in on YouTube that asked about, can you do an OTF font or just the true type fonts? Only the true type outline fonts are the ones that work. OTFs are not currently compatible. Okay, so outlines. I'm going to create good morning, Edith and Cecilia. How about setting the stitch direction? Okay. When Rudy, you said, how about setting the stitch direction? You mean on which way it runs on a running stitch, or it's all about your starts and stops, or the stitch direction on a fill? What specific? All right. So I'm going to find a true type font. Let's find a beefy one. Here, let's do that one. Okay. So I typed some lettering. It's a true type font. I centered it. I'm going to zoom in on it, turn it to 3D. I don't like how that looks, so I'm going to change that over to, how about setting the stitch direction on the ring? Okay, so I think, Rudy, what you're asking is when you're dealing with a hat and you're trying to sew a rectangle out, by changing the stitch direction, what you're going to affect is the push, how much the push and pull. So how much the pull is going to basically increase the distortions. That's not going to change the fact that you're on a curve as it is. So you can minimize the amount of pull by, if I go straight up and down, it's going to shrink this way rather than side to side. So you can play with that somewhat, but in the end, you're still going to have to adjust the design to be more trapezoidal in order to get it to look like an actual rectangle on a curved surface. Okay. All right. So back to this guy. I'm going to change that there. All right. So I have some text. It's a true type font. So the question was, how do we put some borders on that? All right. So 2 borders. So if you select the text, so whatever, I typed it out, hold the shift key down on the keyboard, and then with the shift key clicked, I'm going to click on single line center. And then I'm going to make that a different color. Okay. So now that's one outline. But you'll notice that outline is basically straight down the middle of our lettering. When we're doing 2 sets of outlines, now we have to adjust that. So I'm going to take all of these, right click on them and go into the properties. These are all the outlines. And under the single line tab, I'm going to change that to left. So all that did was it made it where, if I zoom in here, this edge is now right up against where that fill is. Is that generally something you want to do? Well, if you're going to sew it directly without putting a second border over it, you'll end up with a gap between your lettering, right? Which isn't what we want. But now I'm going to select the lettering again, hold my shift key down, click on single line center, and I'm going to put that one after. And now I've got 2 sets of outlines. So this one's over to the edge, this one's down the middle, splitting the difference to make sure I've got a nice overlap and I don't have gaps in anything. Now, what you don't want to do is sew a really long name and then do all of these outlines and then all of these outlines. It's not going to line up. You're going to end up with issues there. So when you're done, so let's say you create all your outlines, you're happy with the font, your underlays, you're happy with everything, okay? I'm just going to pretend I am here. What you're going to want to do is rearrange this for 1 or 2 letters at a time. I wouldn't do any more than that, of outlining as you go. So sew the O, then all the outlines on the O. So the U, or maybe the UT, but you really don't want to do all the letters at once and then all the outlines at once. It's a recipe for not doing good things. So from there, you can do operations convert to wireframe, and now it's just a rearranging game. So if I'm going to do the O, then I come down here, select my O outlines, left click, and oh, I did that quick. All right. And then just drag it up. How I did that is there's the L, or the U, excuse me. I'm going to select my U outline, hold the control key, select the other U outline. So now both of those are highlighted, left click and drag it up. So it's going to do there, the first border, then the second border. Okay. What if a font has a script font? Okay, so on YouTube, there's a question that, what if a font is a script font and the letters are overlapping? Okay, so in those cases, your outlines, let's see. I think, did I do that last week? I had an example that I had created. No, not last week. It's relatively recent. Sorry, I'm just looking real quick to see if I see it. Okay, like this. All right, so let's say you've got a script font. Yeah, okay. Where it's all overlapping. In those cases, rather than using the actual font, I created this in Illustrator, and then what you'd want to do is take all of that and merge it together. So from there, now your outlines would work, right? So because then I can select it the same way, hold my vector, hold my shift key down, click on the border, and then I've got, not that you can see it, but then I've got a border. This one is too small to do a satin stitch like that. I'd want to change it over to a bean stitch or make the font larger, whatever it's going to be. So dealing with scripts are a little bit different. You either have to digitize it manually, or you've got to merge everything together and then create your outlines once it's all merged. There's a question again on YouTube. Do you have a favorite font for Christmas stockings? I don't know. I like things that are thick in general because I don't like the fur eating. So I'll use scripted things like this, the block fonts, I don't know. Pretty much anything that's not thin is what I like using. I'll ask around and see if anyone else has a strong preference. Okay, so we rearranged this. What other questions do we have? Back to my preset ones. All right, so we did that. Small lettering, there's a really nice video out there. It's about 45 minutes long that goes over, excuse me, lettering in detail. Now, if you have never looked at the Melco service site, so if you go melco-service.com, if you go there, there's this FAQ section. So I just like to show you where you can find this rather than me telling you a link. I can search small lettering, and that first thing that comes up is a whole bunch of resources on it, including a link to the video, other just considerations that you might want to read up on and study to kind of get different suggestions. What I would suggest for the lettering is review those. Scott did a fantastic job with the video there, so that's where I would start on small lettering. And then after those, let me know if those didn't cover something specifically, and we can get the more content created for you. Is there an easy way to set up concentric circles or arches? Yeah, kind of. So if I go to new, I have a new file. I'm just going to do it with a walk right here, and then click on this automatic circle input tool. Okay, If I hold the shift key down, that'll lock it. So on my keyboard, I left click, then I held the shift key down, dragged, and left click again. From there, now I have a circle. So I can say what size I want that to be down here. So 2, enter. All right, and then I'm gonna center that. So now I have a 2-inch circle. So if I duplicate that, which you can do by right clicking, going to duplicate, you can copy using Control C, Control V. It all does the same thing. Now I have 2 of them. So then I can make that one 3 inches. And then again, I can copy paste, make that one 4 inches. So whatever size you're going for, you can make concentric circles pretty quick. Another way you can do it is, let's say you don't have a specific size you want, you just want to scale it until it looks good to you. Well, if to scale items, you select it, notice you've got a box with the black squares, all right? That means you're in a scale mode. If I just grab that corner, look what it does. It scales it towards the bottom. I'm pointing at my screen. All right, let me undo that. So when I grab this corner, it's going to scale relative to here. However, if I hold my alternate key down, it scales from the midpoint. So by holding alternate on the keyboard as I'm left click and drag, now notice it's still letting me stretch it. If you want it to stay a circle, alternate makes it scale from the center, shift makes it lock the proportions. So shift and alternate on the keyboard, left click and drag my box, and I've got concentrics. I've got circles, copy, paste, hold my shift and alt on the keyboard, and drag. Okay. Let's go quick check for questions. I don't see any others typed in yet, so I'll keep going. Have we done one on Acti-feed? Yes, we've done that. So the 820, as well as in the manual, Nate did a video that talks all about Acti-feed. So that's where I'd suggest starting first. Take a look at those, see if if there's something specific that we don't cover, let us know and we'll get that updated. Okay. Can part of an expanded file be subtracted from under a complex fill? Yes and no. Yes, you can. No, you probably don't want to do that. So let me open up an expanded file. I have one saved out on my C drive. Oops. Let's do that one. And then I'm going to draw a complex fill. I'm just going to make a rectangle. All right. So, not that this is anything you'd want to do, but if I want to delete the stitches that are under there, what would I do, right? So, you would need to go into expanded editing mode, which is right here. Expanded editing mode. If I turn that off real quick, actually turn it off at 3D. There we go. So notice when it's in expanding editing mode, you can see all those points. So I can select right here this custom point selection tool, and I can draw a circle around it. Notice all those points select. I can hit the delete key. So yes, you can. However, see these long lines? Those are long stitches, which not a good idea to do in general, because when you create those really long jump stitches without the needle penetrations along the way, one, it's just gonna drag a piece of thread across your work, which is obnoxious. And on top of that, depending on the speed that you're sewing at, it might be a recipe for breaking needles. So deleting stitches like this, while you can do it, isn't necessarily the best idea. You just got to pay attention to what you're doing. And if you create these jump stitches, you know, add an extra stitch, insert a trim, something like that, so that you can break it apart and get rid of those really long jump stitches. Okay. So yes, you can, but just be careful if you're doing that kind of thing. Okay. Recommended satin stitch widths for digitizing. All right, so I drew a little picture here to talk to. So the stitch width that they're talking about is how long a column would be of your satin stitches. All right, so from one side to the other, what's the minimum you should do that as. So to think about it, you got to keep in mind all your needles, most needles are roughly 7 to 8 points in diameter. All right. So when you make a needle penetration into your fabric, when you move that needle over, what you're trying to do is leave it long enough that you end up with a stitch and you're not stabbing in that same hole over and over again, right? So if my needle is 7 points, if I only move 2 points over, I'm still in that same hole, right? So in general, you want to be bigger than this. For satin stitches, really no more than 10, no smaller than 10. That gives you maybe a 2-point space. Honestly, I prefer closer to bigger than 12 points, as high as 70 points. The longer your satin stitches get without needle penetrations between it, the longer the piece of thread is, and it's more prone to snagging. So, somewhere it's a personal preference, somewhere between 60 and 70 points is really where you want to cut that off, because otherwise the threads are just too long. It's too easy to hook. I mean, imagine if I had a 1-inch jump on my left chest here. So I had my name written out with really long threads. Well, if I put a pencil in there, it's going to snag it, right? Whereas if I've got smaller needle penetrations, shorter stitches, it's going to be harder for my pen or pencil going in and out to snag those threads. So it'll look nice longer. So for your satin stitches, I would say no smaller than 10 points. Honestly, I would do that closer to 12 to 70. Walk stitches, again, that's where you're just going step to step around 15 points, and then your fills, no smaller than roughly 20 points. Okay. Yeah. So that is recommended satins. Any other questions? Yeah. Nope, not yet. All right. There was any info on thread density and how to know the right number to use. So the density in general, there's a little bit of kind of experience that goes into that. But if you're not aware, there's a table out on Madera's website that you can look at. And let me drag it over here so you guys can see it. So again, since I'll show you how to get to it. If I just go to Madera's website, and then down at the bottom, they've got this resource thing. And then down here, how to set density settings for various threads. That will take you here. So you can see based on the thread, a Polyneon 60, which is a thinner thread, that's what you're going to use for your smaller text. They say a density of roughly 3.5 points is your starting point, right? And then of course smaller needles. If you're using your Polyneon 40, which is a more standard thread, in those cases you'd start around 4 and then go up or down depending. Now keep in mind, there is a little bit of experience to that, because the thinner something gets, the more open you can have the stitching and still have it look clean. The larger you have something, you're going to need the threads closer together to get a nice fill or a nice coverage of the fabric. So thanks, Lorena. So yeah, the density is really, what you're actually looking at for density is the distance between stitches. So on a satin stitch like this, or it's going to be from this to that. So if my density on a satin stitch is 4, that means from here to here is going to measure 4 points, 0.4 millimeters, right? So if the things you're thinking is, oh, I see too much fabric, I don't have enough coverage, I'm not, I need to fill it in more. If those are the types of things you're thinking, all right, that means you would decrease your density, right? So if you're using 4, you might want to go down to 3.5. On the other hand, if you're looking at a sew out and you're going, oh my gosh, there's so much thread, it's too dense, I need to lighten it up, I need to spread out the thread, reduce the thread, if that's the kind of narrative going on in your head, then you'd want to increase your density. Okay, so how do you know the right number? All else fails, use auto. If you're not sure where to start, use auto, and then when you have a sew out that looks great, look at what they used and start building your personal library of what you like. This question came in, and honestly, I don't understand the question, so I'm not sure how to answer it for you. I'm so sorry. When I reorder a wireframe, it skips to another point, having to look back. I've not seen that. If you have a actual example, a video or something you can send to applications@melco, we can take a look at it and get a better understanding of what you're looking for there. Okay, let me go a quick scroll for questions. I don't see any on YouTube. So back to Facebook. All right. I'm doing lettering design. It's a script. Some areas are way too narrow, so I added pull comp to fix the problem. Would you fix it another way? No, that's the exact way I'd fix it. So pull compensation, that's what you can do. Well, let me quick go to DesignShop so I can show you. So let's do the Juliet script because it's got some thin stuff there. Okay, so you've got some really narrow areas, you've got thicker areas. So when you go into the properties for this guy, under pull compensation, this is where you adjust it. You can do pull comp by percent or by offset. Percent is multiplication. It looks at the length of a stitch and you tell it how far. So if I do this big, notice this hardly changed at all, but this part got a lot wider. Right? So I don't like that one. I don't use that one much at all because it can add distortion into your designs. An easier way to see that effect is, let's make this a triangle or something, not a square. So if I, again, do the same thing here, that in no way resembles the shape that I originally drew anymore, right? I mean, it's even got an extra side on it because it's looking at the length from one side to the other in the direction of your stitching, and it says, all right, if that's 2 inches, I'm going to overstitch by 80%. All right, I'm going to overstitch by that amount. So you can add distortions into your design. So rather than that, I like using offset. It's a personal preference. It's not right or wrong. It's what do you like? You'll find if you put a bunch of digitizers in a room and ask them, here, digitize this, you'll find we'll all do something slightly different and we'll get sew outs that are all acceptable. It's just our personal preferences, and that's all right. That's what makes us unique, right? So pull offset, I'm going to overdo this a lot just so you can see the effect. All it's doing is it's making it bolder. All right. So should you use a 7-point offset? No. 1 to 3 points. If you're finding that you're trying to make it bolder and going bigger than 3 points, try making the font bigger first before adding additional offset. Around curves and stuff, particularly when you start getting into big numbers, it doesn't look as nice as it should, right? So that's exactly what I do for, making it a little bolder. 1 to 3 points, we'll clean that right up. Okay. All right. What other questions do you guys have? Because I don't think I had any others sent in. No. So those were the questions. Yeah, and I covered all those. Okay. So those are all the questions I had typed in. If you have any questions, I'll hang on for a little bit, just see if any more get typed in on YouTube or on Facebook, whichever. I'm bouncing back and forth to look at them both. But remember, you can always type them in on these feeds. You can email applications@melco.com and we'll try to get your questions answered, added to the DS Talk. There's a lot of resources out there for you to be successful. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. Oh, thank you, Connie. I'm glad. I hope these are helpful for you. If there's particular topics you want us to cover, please let us know. If it's not something if it requires more than, just kind of talking to it during a DS talk, if we want to, if you've got ideas of things you want to hear for one of the Wednesday sessions or something like that, let us know and we'll try to get those done. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'm going to go drink some hot tea and try to get my voice to feel better. Excuse me. And I will see you guys. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I hope I'm feeling better soon. I don't like this cold. It's putting a damper on my training for a marathon. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoy these, that they're helpful. Again, email your questions, applications@melco.com. And we'll get your questions answered for you. All right. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. And I will be back next week. It's going to be on Thursday. So next Thursday, like I said, we're rotating Thursday, Friday. I have a conflict every other week at the moment. So, and I'll be back on Thursday, see what questions you might have. All right. Happy weekend. Bye.